Marriage Reconstruction Ministry exists to help men and women rebuild marriages that have been affected by a wife's childhood sexual abuse. My primary work is with husbands of the sexual abuse survivors. Most often, when men call me, it is because their wives are experiencing disturbing effects that are disrupting their marriage. There's a long list of possible effects. They include relational difficulties and conflict, social anxiety, eating disorders, sexual intimacy struggles, shame, self-blame, panic attacks, depression, the list goes on. And every survivor's story is unique. So when a man calls me, it could be in any number of effects that he's experiencing from his wife and his marriage. But all of these effects distort perceptions, disrupt routines, and damage a relationship. Unfortunately, the wives of these men who are survivors of sexual abuse are viewed as the ones having the problem. The assumption is if they would just get help and work on their stuff, the marriage would be just fine. However, one consistent observation in my research of and work with husbands over the past 15 plus years is that husbands bring their own adverse factors into the relationship, into the marriage. Adverse factors are the perspectives and behaviors a husband brings into his marriage that either mimic the events surrounding his wife's sexual abuse or clash with the effects of her abuse. Now, this is a bold statement, but as one husband states it, we bring our own stuff into the marriage. In this video, I want to identify 4 adverse factors. They're not the only 4, but we'll identify 4 by way of illustrating. Consider with me Logan and Callie. Not their real names, but Logan and Callie represent many couples whose marriage is affected by sexual abuse. Logan brought into his marriage a secret life of viewing pornography. The more he viewed pornography, the more secrets he kept from Callie and from others. And the more his own perspectives were distorted by the images of that pornography. The first adverse factor to consider is that Logan brought into his marriage the adverse factor of distortion. Logan's distortion of sexual intimacy mimicked the events surrounding Callie's sexual abuse. The habitual viewing of pornography forms neurological pathways in a person's thinking, as it did for Logan. And for Logan, it twisted his thinking, whereby he began objectifying women, including Callie. And also, he began to see the sexual intimacy as a time of being serviced by a woman, which was his expectation for Callie. The outcome was that Logan viewed Callie as a body for his pleasure. Now, this would be a problem in any marriage, but for Callie and for survivors of sexual abuse, they have already been objectified, and they've already been servicing a man. For Callie, she was objectified by her perpetrator, and she was pressed into servicing her perpetrator. So the outcome for Callie in the sexual intimacy is that she had a deep sense that something was wrong. There was a wound that was being reopened within her, and she knew that she was being viewed as a performer and as a pleaser rather than as a person. For her, sexual intimacy meant anxiety, not intimacy. Logan's distortion of objectifying Callie and of viewing intimacy as being serviced by a woman mimicked the events surrounding Callie's sexual abuse. Their relationship was one of coercion on Logan's part and concession from Callie, all because of the distortions that existed in Logan's life. Logan's habitual viewing of the pornography also led to a second adverse factor, the first one being distortion. The second adverse factor was a deception. Callie's perpetrator in her childhood sexual abuse was someone who should have been trustworthy, but his deception through lies and secrets and betrayal shattered any trust that Callie could have in him or her, whoever the perpetrator might be. Logan was someone, as Callie's husband, who should have been trustworthy. But his deception, his lies, his secrets, his betrayal, once again shattered the trust that Callie should have been able to have in him. And because of his deception, he mimicked the events surrounding Callie's sexual abuse. Let's move on from Logan and Callie to a third adverse factor. And this one is the adverse factor of dominance and control. Sexual abuse makes the victim feel powerless because they are powerless. The perpetrator has power over them because of a position of authority or because of their age or because of their size. In adulthood, some survivors are accustomed to this framework of feeling powerless and sometimes are drawn to a person who is able to take charge and have control. So let's imagine along comes a partner who takes charge, and the survivor of abuse is sometimes drawn to that person, being accustomed to being compliant. And the person who has the power thinks they have found the perfect partner because the partner's compliant. However, in marriage, as the survivor continues on and grows into adulthood, no longer do they want this feeling of powerlessness. And for some survivors, they will fight to have control, which then results in resentment. He resents her because she's not appreciating him. She resents him because of his dominance and his control. So put that together. Her powerlessness, his dominance, mimics the dominance of the perpetrator and the powerlessness of the victim. But not only that, they clash together, resulting in a resentment of each other that thwarts any possibility of emotional intimacy. The fourth adverse factor that we're looking at in this video is that of the designated wounded rescuer. Sometimes there are men who meet a survivor of sexual abuse who realize what she has suffered through and the effects she's going through, and yet take on this idea that they can be the rescuer because of some way in which they had been wounded in their own past. Perhaps it was the trauma of being raised in a home with an alcoholic father, or in some cases, husbands of survivors were also sexually abused in their own childhood. But nevertheless, the husband feels that he really understands the plight of his wife, the survivor, and that he can rescue her and fix her. Let's compare. If we go back to Logan and Callie, Logan viewed Callie as an object, but the designated wounded rescuer views his wife as a project, that he can fix her. But his own wounds and unresolved issues become adverse factors that clash with her effects. Initially, their shared pain drew them together, but eventually their pain and unresolved issues become directed at each other in their marriage. Adverse factors are the perspectives and behaviors a husband brings into his marriage that either mimic the events surrounding his wife's sexual abuse or clash with the effects of her abuse. Again, husbands bring their own stuff into the marriage. And the adverse factors then reopen the wounds of his wife, the sexual abuse survivor. So, are you ready to examine and explore what adverse factors exist in your life and contribute to the marital tensions that you're experiencing? In the next video, we will begin exploring how we can identify the adverse factors that exist in our own lives.